We're still recording. I think we're good.
Go ahead and move over here so that I'm a bit closer to the mic.
All right, so let's get started. This is the College Park P City meeting on July 9th, 2025, beginning at 7:19, now 7:20 p.m. We're going to begin our meeting with a guest speaker. We have Jean Zastro from the Maryland Department of Agriculture here to talk about mosquitoes in Maryland. Thank you, Jean. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Alrighty, so as you said, I am Jean Zastro. I'm an entomologist for the Maryland Department of Agriculture, Mosquito Control. I'm the head of the program in Anne Arundel County specifically. So, mosquitoes in Maryland. First off, mosquito biology. So, in Maryland specifically, there's about 60 species, 10 genera. Only about 10 of these species are of concern for vectoring disease. A lot of other ones can be a nuisance. They'll occupy a lot of different habitats, have a lot of different habitat requirements. Different species of mosquitoes can be generalists or be very specific about what they want in terms of habitat. Most mosquitoes have a very quick life cycle and will produce a lot of generations per season. Some species you'll get one big brood per year, and that'll be it. They're done for the year. Other mosquitoes, they just keep producing broods throughout the year as long as the weather is favorable. And that's what most of our common pest species do. So, quick overview of the mosquito life cycle. Mosquitoes are aquatic. They lay their eggs on or near water or in locations where water will be in the future. Their larvae require water to live in. Their pupae also are in water, and then the adults are the only stage of life that does not live in water. Egg to adult depends on species. They can take anywhere from a few days to a month to develop, to go through their entire life cycle. Also, they have complete metamorphosis, not unlike a butterfly. So here's some pictures of mosquito eggs. They're very, very small. Some species will stick them, basically glue them all together, kind of lay a bunch of eggs at once in a raft that then floats on top of the surface. There could be as many as 300 eggs in a raft. Other species will lay them singly along the edge of the water. On the right-hand side, photo all the way to the right, you can see Anopheles mosquito eggs. They just float on the surface, and they've got like little floaties on. Here's some mosquito larvae. Like I said, they live in water. They must live in water. If the water goes the way, they die. They also have to breathe air. So all mosquito larvae have either a long or a short tube at the end of their abdomen that they have to stick through the surface of the water to breathe. They're very active. They wiggle around in the water a lot if you look at them. And they're very sensitive to light and movement. So, if you walk next to like a puddle with mosquito larvae in it, they'll notice if your like shadow crosses the water or if they notice you moving, and will dive towards the bottom to try and get away. Mosquito pupae. That's the stage where, of course, they're developing into an adult mosquito, and unlike pretty much any other insect, the pupae are very active. They can actually tumble through the water to try and get away from anything that's trying to eat them. They also have to breathe air. So then we have adult mosquitoes. Female mosquitoes live for about 3 weeks on average. Male and female mosquitoes both feed on nectar or plant juices. That's what gives them the energy to fly, and that's what powers their own bodily processes. Only female mosquitoes bite because they need the blood for eggs, to develop eggs, they need that protein. Depending on species, they can have a large variety of flight ranges. That is, say, like where they hatch out, some species will only fly a couple hundred meters. Some species have been recorded up to 50 miles from where they hatch. So feeding behavior. Mostly, it depends on species. Some are generalists, they'll bite anything that has blood. Other species mostly feed on birds. There's a species that feeds mainly on earthworms. Some species are what we'll call ambush predators. They basically wait in shrubbery or, plant matter to, or under a deck, wait for something to come by. A lot of our native species will just emerge in the evening and go actively looking for a blood meal. So I mentioned the species that feeds on earthworms. This is it, Urantinea sapphirina, and here they are feeding on earthworms. They're very pretty, and they do not bother humans at all.
Do earthworms have blood?
They do. Yep.
Who knew?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, this species, they'll also occasionally feed on like frogs and whatnot, but they prefer earthworms. And have also been found feeding on leeches. Yep. So, quick run through our most common genuses of, or genera of mosquitoes. So we've got Aedes. You'll see it says Aedes/Ochlorotatus. That's because there was an argument in the taxonomy world. Most of these used to be classified as just Aedes, and then someone figured out that a bunch of them probably, should be classed as Ochlorotatus instead, but most people working with mosquitoes just kind of ignored that. So we just mostly call them Aedes. Anyway, a lot of your most familiar pest mosquitoes are in this group. So you've got Aedes albopictus, that's the Asian tiger mosquito. Ochlorotatus sollicitans, that is the golden saltmarsh mosquito. Aedes aegypti, that's the yellow fever mosquito. These mosquitoes are often, they're the ones that will have very stripy legs or look overall stripy in appearance, but they don't always look like that. This genus, how far they'll fly from hatch site depends on the species. Some of them stick very close to home, others of them go very, very far. And also, again, breeding sites quite varied in this genus. Culex mosquitoes. They're basically brown. These ones, if you see a mosquito that has basically no markings, is just brown, it's very likely a Culex mosquito. They are the genus that is of the most concern for vectoring West Nile virus, especially the species Culex pipiens and Culex brestuens. They'll fly about 1 to 2 miles away from wherever they hatched, and they breed in, it says here, permanent and semi-permanent water. So basically like water that is around most of the time, as opposed to, like if a puddle is small enough that it dries up in 2 days, they're not going to breed in that. But if you have a wheelbarrow in the backyard that, has water in it most of the time, they will breed in that. Anopheles. These are quite common, but not seen as much because they mostly come out right in the middle of the night. They're pretty light adverse. Bodies are very plain, but they have patterns on the wings. They also do a little headstand when they bite. They also, depending on species, they'll breed in permanent and semi-permanent water. Anopheles punctopenis and Anopheles quadrimaculatus are the 2 species, especially in the US, that vectored malaria back when malaria was endemic. So here are the mosquito-borne diseases that can be found in Maryland. West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis are the ones that we are the most concerned about because they are established in Maryland. West Nile virus was introduced, Eastern equine encephalitis is native. We also have St. Louis encephalitis and La Crosse encephalitis. They very occasionally show up. And then you have diseases like malaria and Zika and dengue and chikungunya. Mostly in Maryland, if they show up, they are travel-related cases. They're cases where someone went somewhere else, got the disease, and came back. So, quick overview of West Nile virus. You can see here the disease cycle. It reservoirs in birds and is vectored by mosquitoes from bird to bird, and then humans and horses and some other animals are what's called dead-end hosts. It was first detected in the US in 1999. It's now present throughout the US. Again, mainly vectored by Culex mosquitoes. There are some others that have been shown capable of vectoring it though. About 20% of the people infected develop symptoms. Usually it's kind of like a mild flu, but it can be a lot worse than that. Can be fever, aches, joint pain, vomiting, diarrhea, rash. Less than 1% develop severe neurological illness, but you can get that at any age. But the most at risk are over 60 or immunocompromised. So Eastern equine encephalitis, we call this one triple E. This is the one that's native to the US. It got its name because it's 98% fatal in horses. And it also, however, is fatal to 1/3 of the humans that get it. If you get this disease, it's very, very, very serious. And if you manage to survive, you will be left with some kind of neurological damage. It might be as small as a facial tic. It might be as much as like half your body is paralyzed. Now we have malaria. Malaria is an interesting one. It is a protozoan instead of a virus. It has a very complicated life cycle. It is also one of the most deadly diseases in history, certainly the most deadly of the vector diseases. It was formerly common in the US. It was found as far north as Maine, and it was eliminated from the contiguous US in the mid-1950s through a combination of federally supported mosquito elimination programs and also larger numbers of people having access to screens for windows and air conditioning. Like I mentioned before, it was in the US mainly vectored by Anopheles quadrumaculatus and Anopheles punctopenis. This is a disease that could make a comeback in the US. We have had, in the past couple of years, some locally transmitted cases in Florida and Texas, and also we had one locally transmitted case in Maryland in 2023. Alrighty, so mosquito control. This will be about what we do at MDA with our program and also what everyone else can do. So the MDA mosquito control program is run as an IPM program, which is to say what we are most focused on is reducing but not eliminating mosquitoes in a way that has the lowest impact we can manage on the environment. Up in the box at the top of the slide, you can see what we specifically do. We'll do biological controls, such as releasing fish. We will use biorational pesticides, such as BTI or insect growth regulators, and we'll also, when we need to, use conventional pesticides. The bottom part of this pyramid, we don't have the resources so much to do, but it is where the public can help a lot, or communities, municipalities, counties, that sort of thing. Because cultural control, which is changing the ecosystem so you're not breeding mosquitoes as much, or doing source reduction, getting rid of tires or specific, puddles in parking lots and that kind of thing. That helps a lot as well. But at the MDA, we don't have the resources to do that ourselves so much. So the MDA program, 4 main parts to it. We do surveillance, we do large sighting, we do adult sighting, we do public education. Not all counties in Maryland participate in the state program. Some counties get some services, but not all of them. 3 counties in Maryland run their own programs, and also there's none of the Western Maryland counties currently participate. So basically, Caroline, Frederick, and west of there, none of them are part right now. So surveillance. This is where we put out traps to monitor the adult mosquito population. We're looking at what species are present, what the population density is like, and potential disease presence. We're monitoring for that as well. We use different traps depending on what we are specifically trying to monitor. if we're looking for a specific species or we are specifically looking for, West Nile virus presence or absence, we will also, as, our employees are out in the field, they will do what's called dipping. They go out with little cups and they will, use those to scoop out water and check for mosquito larvae, and that's another way we surveil. Mosquitoes that are caught are brought back to the lab, and we identify them down to species, and then the species that are of interest to us, we then pack up and send to the Maryland Department of Health to be tested. So, larviciding. Every product that we use for larviciding at this point are biorational. They're either bacterial agents or they're insect growth regulators. Most of our applications are reactive. Basically, our employees are going out and seeing, oh, there are actively mosquitoes breeding in this location, therefore we will treat. Some sites, however, we will treat preemptively. We have some products where, if we know a site, breeds every year, we can put it in at the beginning of the season. We also do back checks to make sure that where we are treating, that nothing that we're doing is affecting non-target species. So that the other plants and animals or anything else that's there are not being affected by what we're doing. Some locations we will also stock with fish, such as fathead minnows, for long-term control. Adult siding. So this is pesticide applications to control adult mosquitoes. They are only done by the state when certain criteria are met. Either the mosquito population has to be sufficiently high, we call that over threshold, or there needs to be a known disease threat in the area. Individuals who do not want to be fogged, they can opt out of getting sprayed. Basically, they can contact our office that is in that area and ask for an exemption. Basically, what we'll do then, we take note of that person's address and we create a 300-foot buffer zone around their property, and we will not spray in that zone. This only applies to standard applications. If there's a disease application going on, we suspend exemptions. MDA also runs an aerial application program on the Eastern Shore. The plane is mostly used for larviciding. Every once in a while, it's also used for adult siding, though, depending on what mosquito populations are doing out there. So, what can you do? Well, first off, I do not recommend using a private mosquito control company. The main reasons are these companies' aim is to get results. So they're mostly using what we call broad spectrum long residual pesticides. These are the pesticides that they will kill everything, and they will stick around for days or weeks or even longer, just killing, all the bugs in the area. Except, mites, aphids, and scale insects, they'll be having a great time. There won't be much of anything else, though. And of course, if you've killed off all your bugs, you're not going to have much other wildlife either. Also, the personnel doing these applications are often not sufficiently trained. So, there is a correct way to do what's called a barrier treatment. However, it's, fairly knowledge intensive and fairly time consuming. And a lot of these companies are not so worried about that. They're just worried about killing everything and making the client happy because everything is dead. If you do want to use a private mosquito control company, make sure that they have Category 8 certification. So if a company has certification to do control for, say, landscape pests, that is not the same thing as having certification to do control for mosquitoes. It is a different test. So, best thing you can do is learn to identify breeding habitats. The most important step to solving a mosquito issue is knowing where they're coming from. We know this as professionals. Private citizens can also learn this. If you can find where the mosquitoes are coming from, that site can then either be treated or removed. And it is the most effective way to take care of mosquitoes. Even if, direct treatment of adults is being done, if you can stop them breeding in the first place, that's the best thing to do. So where do they breed? These are examples of where they're not coming from. They're not coming from the Chesapeake Bay. They're not coming from the Potomac River. They're not coming from the big lake near your property. They are not coming from the large, fast-flowing stream near your house. They're coming from places like these. So, stormwater management ponds, holes in trees that catch water, ditches that are backed up, tire ruts that are full of water, puddles in random locations, sheet water from, when you have flooding, there's probably some now because of this storm. Places in the woods that would be a stream, except now it's stopped flowing, places like that. So if these habitats are on your own property, you might be able to treat them or eliminate them yourself. However, you need to make sure before you do that it's not protected wetland. You can go to the DNR website, Department of Natural Resources. They have mapping on what is considered a protected wetland in Maryland. If the breeding area is a stormwater management pond or a roadside ditch, or it's in a community space, and also is not protected wetland, the city or the county may also be able to come in and help to modify the site or eliminate the cause if it's a small, a wet area has been formed by a broken pipe or something like that. If that gets fixed, then you've solved the problem. So now we're going to talk about the Asian tiger mosquito, because most of the time, if you are having bad mosquito issues, it's usually these. So their scientific name is Aedes albopictus. They were introduced in Maryland in 1987. They're closely associated with humans. It's very rare to find these anywhere very far away from where humans live or, work or where they are, because they develop only in broken off bamboo canes or tree holes or containers. They are capable of vectoring West Nile and some other diseases. And they are, of course, very annoying. They mainly bite during the day. They will readily follow you into your home, into your car. They're very persistent and aggressive. Also, they are what we call skittish. So while they will follow you and while they're very intent on biting, they'll also, they can, land and take a little bit and then get scared away, but then they come back right, in a moment and try again. So one mosquito can bite you multiple times. They're very difficult to eliminate unless you can get rid of all of the breeding sites that they are coming from. A lot of people will just stop using their yard once this species is there. They're that annoying, and they will breed in as little as a teaspoon of water. So, what are some habitats that they like? All of these are places that have Asian tiger mosquitoes breeding in them. You have a recycling bin, you have a, clogged gutter, there's an upside down kids wading pool, there's a random plastic container. The center picture, that was a vase in a cemetery that had water, a little bit of water in it, was breeding mosquitoes, breeding Asian tiger mosquitoes specifically. Here's some more habitats. Dishes under plant pots, a unmaintained bird bath, a wheelbarrow, top of a fence post where the cap came off. And the bottom left is a picture of a tray of water that was absolutely full of mosquito larvae. That water came out of the base of a basketball, a kid's basketball hoop that they weighed down with water, and then the plug got lost, so the mosquitoes got in. Here's some more habitats. The seat of a lawnmower, you've got a dog bowl that was mostly tipped over, but the underside has collected water. A picnic table that was overturned and has a grid on it that's collected water. Boxes that were left out. A liner for a pickup that's collected a bit of water. Also, black corrugated drain pipe. That is genuinely one of the worst. In my experience, I've had so many times where I have gone to inspect the yard and people were absolutely mystified where the mosquitoes were coming from, and I went and found They had black corrugated drain pipe, and there were Asian tiger mosquitoes flying in and out. Because every one of those corrugations will collect water and they'll breed in all of them. Even more tiger habitat. Yep, they love tigers, love them, love them, love them. You know, it's basically, I show all this to show like basically literally anything that is holding water, they can and will breed in. I have seen them breeding in a bottle cap. You know, they are extremely good at finding little bits of water. They actually, the way they first got to the US was they came over in shipments of used tires and then just spread from there. So, what can homeowners do? Check your yard weekly and tip or remove any water holding containers. Talk to your neighbors about what they can look for. And if Asian tires are the issue, the problem cannot be fixed by cleaning only one yard. It doesn't matter if you cleaned up your yard, if your neighbor has buckets or anything, you are still going to have mosquitoes. Try and work with community officials to educate the whole community about Asian tiger mosquitoes. If you have an ornamental pond, stock it with fish that will eat mosquito larvae. Make sure that windows or doors have screens on them. If you have a deck or a patio that you still want to use, best thing to do is set up some fans so you get a cross breeze because they're not very strong flyers. Also wear repellent. DEET, picaridin, and oil of lemon eucalyptus are the only ones that are proven to work. You know, I know there's all of these like, oh yeah, use peppermint oil or this, you know, this or that essential oil. None of those have been in a lab proven to work. Just these three. Citronella candles, they might help, they might not help. In my experience, if you're someone that's very attracted to mosquitoes, citronella candles are not going to help. However, if they're kind of meh on you, citronella candles might help a lot. Traps also, they can be helpful, but they're going to be most effective if you have also paired that with getting rid of areas where they can breed. So products like these are something that homeowners can use to treat containers and water, you know, ponds and whatnot in their yard. On the left is the BTI product, on the right is the insect growth regulator product. What communities can do? You can volunteer, so you can help distribute information or do yard inspections. You can get church groups in on this, you know, scouts, high school students, you know, make it a community effort. You can organize community cleanups, help your elderly and disabled neighbors to clean their gutters and yards, help arrange for junk pickup, especially if there's tires. You know, put information in newsletters or anything else going out to homeowners. Put news out on community social media. You know, if you have a Facebook page or you have a, oh, I'm forgetting what that site is, but yeah, anything like that. You know, any ponds stocked with mosquito-eating fish, covenants, codes, HOA agreements, you can put something in there about creating a mosquito nuisance. There is already, I have to look up what specifically it is, but there's already laws on the books for Maryland about if someone is basically creating a health hazard by allowing mosquitoes to breed in their yard, we can take legal action against them. But also individual communities can write in things to strengthen that. You know, bring in code enforcement. You can, you know, call in the municipality or the county for maintenance if there's stormwater systems that are backing up or not maintained. There's roadside ditches that need maintenance, that sort of thing. That's where you go for that. So, fish stocking, I kept mentioning it. Specifically, areas of permanent water within the community, you can put fish in. The best species for this is fathead minnows. They are very adaptable. They can live in a lot of different water conditions. The good thing about them is that they are a native species. It used to be in the past, we used a species called gambusia as the mosquito fish. It is an introduced species. It's a kind of guppy, and it's been found over the years to be highly invasive. So now we only recommend using fathead minnows. Individuals who will be stocking fish are required to have a permit. You can go to the DNR website, I've listed it there, and get a permit free of charge. On that same site, that same page, there is also a list of approved suppliers, some of which have fathead minnows. And here's a page of resources. So we have a lot of information on our website at MDA. If you go to the mosquito control section, there's a lot of information there. University of Maryland Extension is also very helpful. The American Mosquito Control Association has a lot of information. And also there at the bottom for you guys in particular, that is the phone number for the office in this area that covers PG County and the rest of central and western Maryland. That's the number you should call if you have concerns here, and they can come out and do an inspection. Also there on the right, there's my information if you have any questions.
Do you have a Rhode Island number? That's a 401 is a Rhode Island area code.
I don't know, we've always had it.
Just, I was
Oh,
expecting
no,
it to be
it's, oh man,
410.
actually this is, yeah, I'm sorry.
410?
Yeah, it's 410, yeah,
Okay.
yep. I'll have to correct that.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries, no, good catch,
Only
yeah, I'm not
because
sure
I
how that
have
was.
5 tenants in one of my shopping centers that have Rhode Island telephone numbers, and it's just.
Yep, no, good catch, it's 410, yep. So, yeah, anyway, any questions?
I think Anahee has her hand raised. Oh, no, that's the mouse,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, she just listed in that IPM standing for Integrated Pest Management.
Yeah.
But I think everybody knew that here.
Yes.
I've lived in College Park since 1962.
Mhm.
Back in the day when they sprayed for mosquitoes, the truck shot that spray over your house and ran into your backyards as well.
Yep.
I'm 70 years old with major health problems. And I have a neighbor within 300 feet of my house that does not like to be sprayed for mosquitoes, which puts me in more jeopardy because they don't want to be sprayed. That's not right.
Basically, the way we handle that is, the first thing we recommend is talking with the neighbor and asking if they would be willing to reduce the buffer zone. That's the easiest, first solution is, express your concerns, and then if they're willing to reduce the buffer zone, they can contact the office and say, hey, I want to have my buffer zone reduced for this neighbor, and we'll do that. Beyond that, the escalation basically looks like taking it to, writing a petition. At that point, it gets to, in my experience, generally, it gets to then be a community-wide thing, which then gets sent up to the Secretary of Agriculture, who looks it over and, then can make a determination, are we going to just tell this community that they are getting their buffer zones reduced because of concerns of other community members? So,
I mean, I shouldn't have to choose between food or medications to buy stuff to treat my yard so I can sit outside in my own yard. I shouldn't have to do that.
yeah, and the other thing too is you can also call the College Park Mosquito Control Office, which is the number here, and they can look for areas that are breeding. Because like I said, again, if the areas where they're coming from can be eliminated, then you don't have mosquitoes. So, if it's Asian tigers, you and all your neighbors clean up, there'll be way fewer of them. If there are other species that are, coming from somewhere in the area, then most likely we'll be able to treat for that. So, because, the truck is only part of the, the whole story when it comes to controlling mosquitoes. So.
But don't you use specific chemicals for just mosquitoes that will not harm the bees and stuff?
So what we use in the trucks now, it is technically a broad spectrum. However, the way we, specifically it's permethrin is the active ingredient that we use. It's actually the same thing that is found in like Louse shampoo for humans. And the way we try and reduce the impact on the environment and on non-target species has to do with the amount of active ingredient that is in the spray that we're putting out, which I believe we run at about half the label rate as well. And the sprayers that we use, they're called ULV, ultra low volume foggers. And so the droplet size that they're putting out is very, very, very small. And so, as with all poisons, it's a matter of dosage. So every droplet, being that small, only has a small amount of the active ingredient, which means that if larger and harder bodied insects do contact it, they won't die because they haven't gotten a large enough dose. But mosquitoes that are small and soft bodied, if they fly through, they'll collect enough of the pesticide to get a lethal dose. The other way we try and limit impact has to do with the time. That's why we do sprays only in the evening and at night, because things like bees and butterflies, dragonflies, all of those, by that time of day, they're hiding. They're tucked away for the night. So that's how we try and limit the impact, because basically, as of this point, it has not yet been found, there has not yet been a product found that can target only adult mosquitoes in that type of application. And that is where the larvicides come in, where the BTI that we use, that is targeted. And the insect growth regulator, that is also targeted. So anything that's in that water will be fine except for the mosquitoes. Plus, and also, a lot of times mosquitoes are breeding in areas that very little else is living. This is part of their evolutionary strategy, basically, was to find areas to breed where nothing else was there that would eat them. So that's also where, it's okay if we treat, because not a lot else is in there.
Well, the bad part about Hollywood is it was an old swamp.
Yes, I know. A lot of this area was.
It really was.
Yeah.
And I mean, our best scenario is that you all find West Nile virus, so you have to spray. And that's not right either.
Yeah. I mean, we are also, I know they have traps in the College Park. I don't remember all of the sites specifically, but they do monitor. But yeah, my best advice would be to ask your neighbor if they'd be willing to reduce their buffer zone. Since you have concerns, that would be my first piece of advice. That, and also, call the office, have them come out and, inspect for mosquito breeding.
Chair Anahi has her hand
Yeah.
up. Anahi, you're on.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This was very informative, I felt. I had one question. So, you're showing all the tiger mosquito breeding sites, and, I think that one can have two different responses to that. One can be, I'm going to go clean everything up. And the other one is like, why would I clean it up if they can breed anywhere? And so, and I hope, for me, I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm going to go clean it up, right? But even if so say that you have a big yard with lots of containers, and then you take them all away, and now you're very happy, but you forgot this one place. The fact that you forget the one container that you didn't know was there or whatever will still impact the number of mosquitoes that you would have, right? So is that true? It's like if I leave one container versus if I have 50 containers, I should have less mosquitoes with one.
Yeah, you definitely will have way less mosquitoes at that point. You will have far less mosquitoes with one container than with 50. Just, sheer volume, basically. And, with one container, you're looking at basically, you may still have a few mosquitoes versus none. Because we have found if groups of neighbors and communities get together and really properly clean up, they can eliminate Asian tiger mosquitoes. We've had cases where people could do that. because Asian tigers, they don't fly very far from where they hatched. They will fly about 200 meters. So if you have them, you know they're coming from somewhere close.
All right. And so that means that we don't have to do a perfect job. It has to be
Yes.
good enough.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that they can breed on a teaspoon of water.
Yeah, no, like, basically, you know, a good amount of cleanup will help a lot. And if you still have like a few around, you know, to kind of keep an eye out for like, wait, where could they still be coming from?
Okay.
But
Cool.
yes, yep,
That's hopeful.
yes.
Thank you, this has been awesome, and so informative. My question is, when you're doing the adult deciding, do we know when you guys come around to spray, or is that kind of like,
Yeah,
how do you guys
this,
decide where and what happens?
so for this county, you should have had a announcement made at some point for like what night of the week
Okay,
that treatment could happen.
Okay.
You know, basically, PG County, Anne Arundel County in particular, some of the other counties run it a bit different, but I'm pretty sure they do it the same. Where there's enough communities where basically, like, you have an assigned night.
Mhm.
It's not a guarantee that the truck will come that night. It's basically, it will come that night and not another night.
Got
However, treatment happening has to do with everything from like, you know, do we have enough personnel to run through the whole route?
Mhm.
To, is the weather conducive? You know, if it's below, what is it again? If it's below 62 degrees or above 85 degrees, we're not gonna be treating. If it's too windy, we're not gonna be treating. If it's raining, we won't treat. Because all of those conditions basically will nullify the spray, and mean it's not effective, so we just don't.
And if we don't see an announcement from the city, the county, or anyone, then we can assume that our area is not being sprayed?
Most likely, I would check
Yeah.
with College Park, because to my knowledge, they're participating this year, but you have to
Okay.
check. You can, or actually, you can call the College Park Mosquito Control Office and they'll be able to tell you what your night of the week is if you are participating this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the city does participate and they usually announce it, at least I've seen it on social media, on the social media accounts. They usually make an announcement. These are the zones of the city that will be treated if it's good weather, all the things you said. So, and I think now the city also has this text system, so you can sign up for receiving text communications. And so I guess that this would also go through that path, but the city does announce it. I've seen it several times.
And can we
That's good to
assume,
hear.
that it's the entire city? Because I've like never seen
It
any
will-
trucks or heard
Basically,
announcements.
it will be whatever portion or sections of the city that the city requests that we treat.
Okay.
Because basically we have, I don't know exactly how the office here does it, but
Yeah.
basically the community will submit like a map of the area that they want done,
Okay.
and then we'll go off of that. So, you know, it may or may not be the entire area, or it's possible, because I know that there's a number of, you know, exemptions here. It's possible that you're just surrounded by exemptions, and so they just never show up near your
Yeah,
house.
so just the city does announce it. When they make these announcements, they usually publish the map with the districts, and they say this district will be treated, then this district will be treated, then if weather allows and all that. So usually you do have a map of all the districts and the announcements of which ones will be treated and when.
I was gonna say, in my section of Anne Arundel County, which is the northern part of Anne Arundel and Laurel, we had to submit our map for Maryland City and for Watershed and for Russet, because I had to do all that work because nobody else did it.
Oh!
So, and I know our night is Thursday night.
Yep.
We had to put out announcements on email, social media, post it in the clubhouses or wherever else, so.
Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
question about bamboo and how that's like a major breeding ground. Are there any initiatives to help like with bamboo removal?
Not that I'm specifically aware of. Those would be good though, because like that's the habitat they evolved to breed in, is like broken off bamboo canes. And so of course when they got here, oh boy, there's so much of it, and they went, yay! So, but yeah, I'm not currently aware of any specific initiatives for that.
I have one more question, if I may.
Yeah.
So this, I think that this was really useful. Would it be possible for us to, these meetings are recorded, for us to promote this? I don't know if there's any restrictions for the MDA or, the material that was shared, that it can be promoted.
I think that should be fine. I should check with our publicist to make sure. So I can do that, and if you send me your contact info, I can check with her and make sure it's fine, and then let you know.
Okay.
Here's the thing, is that these meetings are recorded,
Mhm.
as you know, and the recordings will be put on the city website underneath the Bee City Committee. So once it gets uploaded, it will be out there. So if there's any issues,
I think that should be
kind of
fine.
have to know pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Like, I'll shoot her an email tomorrow just to make absolutely sure. But like, she already said looked over the talk and was like, it's great. So, I think that should be fine.
Great, thank you.
This is all pretty much, it's, this is the information we want the public to have and to know.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there additional insecticides added to like the sprays that commercial companies are using in addition to permethrin, or? Because I was thinking those are primarily permethrin, but.
Not necessarily, no. There's a variety of different pesticides that they'll use. I think very often they will use things other than permethrin, at least the particular formulations that we use, because they want something that has, because the thing with, actually mostly they're not using permethrin, because permethrin, it's broad spectrum, but short residual. So basically it is only effective for about 30 to 40 minutes after being applied. And specifically with the trucks, when the truck goes by and puts out the fog, it's there in the air column, and capable of knocking down mosquitoes for about 30 to 40 minutes. And after that, between, dispersion just through the air and also falling out of the air column onto the ground, where as soon as it contacts organic matter, it binds to it and becomes inert. So it basically is ineffective after that time period, which is also partly why we use it, because basically by the next morning, it's gone. So any bees or butterflies or anything else that are, out and about the next morning, they don't contact it at all. But those companies, they do want long residual. So they're often using products that, they'll apply it and it's active in killing things for like days or even weeks afterwards. So.
And I know the odor,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a customer who's paying money, they want to know that
Yes.
they're getting something for their money.
Yeah.
Company I used to work for used a combination, I'm pretty sure it was cedar oil and raspberry oil.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a mist, it was just sprayed on the
Yeah.
perimeter
Yeah.
of the properties.
Yeah. They'll often just kind of spray everything around. And more specifically, like the technical term for that is a barrier spray, but when done properly for mosquitoes, it is actually a targeted application to areas where they rest. So done correctly,
Underneath.
exactly,
Yes.
it'll be like underneath, porches and steps, and if there's like English ivy or something, it'll be sprayed like up underneath the leaves, because they love resting underneath those. And nowhere else. A properly done barrier spray is specifically targeting, where mosquitoes rest, and the applicator will know where to target. But again, that takes time, that takes training. That won't necessarily eliminate every single mosquito, in, a 5-mile radius. So oftentimes you will see the applicator just kind of spraying everything.
Sorry to piggyback on that question. So English ivy is a major place where these mosquitoes.
In our experience, it's a very, no, they just, because adult mosquitoes, they're very soft bodied, so they're susceptible to like drying out in sunlight. So they like finding areas that are cool and a little bit damp to sit in during the day. And they seem to love English ivy. Yeah.
So highly recommend replacing that with something.
Yes.
Replacing
It's an invasive anyway.
A couple
Yeah.
questions on the chat.
Let's see. So like I said, the treatments that we do with the trucks last for about 30 to 40 minutes. And then after that, it's, it has dispersed or settled out and it's done, and no longer able to kill things. Yes, absolutely. Taking preventative action is definitely, it's the most effective approach is doing both in concert with each other, but preventative action is going to be generally better than just doing sprays. Because if you, like I've said earlier, if you can eliminate where the mosquitoes are coming from, then you're not going to be having issues with the adults in the first place.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
And this is, I keep thinking about how good this was. Is there any way, and I really want to, it's like now I'm so inspired to just send this to every single person I know. Do you have a PDF of this talk?
Not specifically of this talk, but most all of this information is on our website.
Oh, okay. So if I go to that link that is there, it's going to be in there?
Yes.
Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Yes.
Since what you use, basically, after about 40 minutes is useless. It's done at night so that the bees, the butterflies and whatnot are not harmed. Why do you allow exceptions for people to block being this done? I mean, it's not right.
It's the balance point that we struck, because there are people who feel very, very passionately that they do not want any kind of pesticide, near their yard. Some of these people have, their own medical reasons for it. Some of them are just concerned about, the wildlife or something like that. It's part of why we do have the exception for if we're, specifically doing a disease spray, a disease application, we will suspend all exemptions. But otherwise, most of the time, it's, when it's nuisance control, and there isn't currently a threat of disease transmission, we try and do our best to respect, both the people that want treatment and the people who really, really don't. Especially in this state, there's a lot of people that feel very passionately both ways, and so this is kind of the balance point that we struck. And also in terms of the timing and the length of time that it lasts, and I'll just throw this in as, extra information. Our nighttime fogging operation is targeted towards mainly our native mosquitoes, who are the ones who come out at night and are actively, cruising around searching for a blood meal. The difficulty there is that it's not as effective against Asian tigers because they are ambush hunters. So when we go by with trucks, Asian tigers usually aren't out. So what I have seen in the past is that for native species, the QLX, a lot of the other ADs, the Anopheles, so on, will get, a week and a half or more of control, if we're doing the nuisance sprays with the trucks. Especially if we hit the timing just right, like when a brood has just come out. However, for Asian tiger mosquitoes, we'll get at most like 1 to 2 days of reduced population before they're back, because mostly when we go by, they're all hiding. So this is why we try to educate people on cleaning up their yards, because that is the most effective strategy for Asian tigers. So.
We haven't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'd be willing to bet I have more time in College Park than anybody here or online. And like I say, the old days, they shot that spray over top of your house during the daytime. And
Yeah, that
we
was
still
very
had bees
effective.
and butterflies and stuff then. What has changed?
The Asian tiger mosquito came to the US in Texas in 1987, so it's only been in Maryland for like a
But what they were using then didn't seem to hurt the bees and the butterflies back then, like they're
But
saying
it
it does
was-
now.
It did. A lot of what they were using then was a very, it was pretty powerful stuff.
It was, I mean, it
Yeah,
stung.
So, yeah.
It
yeah.
really did. And like I say, when that truck came by, you could actually see that mist being shot over your house to get into your backyards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
And
These creatures have life cycles,
the,
so maybe you saw the adults flying around and but over time it decreased with affecting the caterpillars, affecting the larvae, affecting the egg stages, and just decreasing it over time.
and basically, so like the daytime applications was partly an artifact of they hadn't refined that that's not a very effective time to treat for mosquitoes, which is part of why in most areas they switched to, no matter what product they're using around the country, they try and do like evening and night sprays. Because again, most of our native species aren't really out during the day. The other difference is that then at that time, there were a lot of other insect species being affected by those sprays, but we had more in total. Just like there was, in terms of like total biomass of insects, there was more. It was a thing where like if you went on a drive to the Eastern Shore, you would probably have to stop partway through and clean, splattered bugs off your windshield. Now you can go here to Ocean City and have almost none. It's kind of an effect of, with all of the environmental, degradation that has happened over time, with, the environmental changes that have happened, with the expansion of development, especially that kind of thing, habitats getting fragmented, habitats getting degraded, the explosion in the deer population has had a really bad effect on overall insect populations. So you put all that together, and just the total number of insects that we have now is a lot less than we had then. So that's why we're trying to be way more careful than we used to be. It's part of the reason, so.
I was gonna point out that there was someone on Zoom that had their hand up but has since retracted. Do you still have a question?
Well, there's another question in the chat from Tara.
Tara, so for lightning bug populations, mostly they're gonna be fine because they're big. They're big enough that they're mostly not going to be very affected by the spray. Health implications for people and pets. So we tell people to stay indoors. It's basically an abundance of caution. Like I mentioned earlier, the specific active ingredient that we use, permethrin, it's the same ingredient that is found in flea and tick collars for dogs and in louse shampoo for humans. And it is present in those products at a far higher concentration than what we are applying. And we have many, many decades of research and data saying that overall, it's a product that has, doesn't particularly affect humans or, mammals. As an active ingredient, it has a potential to affect cats. But again, the amounts that the mosquito control program is putting out is not a high enough concentration to have an effect on them. And that's pretty much the answer for, wildlife in general as well. Like the amount that we're putting out is of the ingredient that actually can kill things is so small that, larger organisms, all of the mammals, the larger insects, the birds, that kind of thing, they're not going to be affected.
John Payne has his hand up.
Yes.
John, would you like to ask your question? Is he here?
Yeah.
Where he is.
I think that because he's not a panelist, he can't unmute himself. You have to unmute him.
Got it. John, you can ask your question.
Looks like he's gone.
John? Or is there? John, if you have to unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Or not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, good, good. It was 3 steps. I did 2, but not the third. As an older person in the neighborhood who experiences fairly high populations of mosquitoes from time to time, because all of my neighbors have opted out, I have to protect my own health, use a commercial service. I'm really concerned about the risk to bees and fireflies and other things that I don't seem to have a choice. Is there a way we could get the word out about the much lower risk of the agricultural spray so that some of us could not have to both pay a very high price, both in dollars and impact on our personal environments, just to have good health?
Yeah, so what I'll say to that, I mean, that me doing this talk is part of, that process of trying to get the word out, like, hey, here's what the state does versus, other sources. Beyond that, I would say that's probably a question for the community itself. In terms of what they could do to, get the word out to community members about, hey, here's what the facts are on these things, and then go from there. That would be what I have to, that would be my recommendation right now.
Yeah, if we could have the facts, if we could have the conversation based on the facts, rather than kind of a polarized no pesticides or control, which is a very polarized discussion. And we could really do it in terms of risk assessment and what is safer and takes into account human health as one of the considerations. It would be a much better discussion.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have anything to chime in about getting word out to the community or anything.
Well, you can always do a municipal scene article.
All right, good. Any last questions?
So I have a question about the when spraying for disease prevention and if there's increased risk. How often has that happened in recent years? Is it primarily West Nile then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's primarily West Nile. We have one reservoir of Triple E here on the western shore, and it's in Patuxent. And it's been a bit since we got a positive out of there. So yeah, mainly it is West Nile. And we do, it's a rare year that we don't do any. But how many we do in a year just depends on what the disease is doing. Some years we get a lot of positives, other years not so much. And we do work also with the, Department of Health, and part of our surveillance is we're trying to catch amplification of the disease in mosquitoes before it has spilled over to humans, because it will amplify in the bird population first. So ideally, we see it like in the mosquitoes, and then we can, respond to that before we're getting any human cases. But we do also respond to any human cases that happen. I'm trying to remember, actually in a prior version of this talk, I had a slide in there with the 2024 data on like how many, well, that was just the human positives data though. I'm trying to remember, I know that in Anne Arundel last year, I'd say we did about 5 treatments for West Nile positives coming out of traps. We did not have any human cases in Anne Arundel last year. We had some more positives than that, but had limitations in terms of personnel and what we were able to do. But yeah, it depends on the year. It's generally always present at least at a low level, but in Maryland, we've seen roughly a 3-year kind of boom and bust cycle on, when West Nile is, circulating commonly versus where, it's not doing much. So.
There's another question in the chat. Are the mosquito dunks available to the public outside of the big box stores?
I am not currently aware of where they are. The general recommendation in the past was like, go to your local hardware store. They probably have some there. And currently the MDA does not have a distribution program for those. What basically the role that the MDA plays is you can call us in for an inspection, and then we can do the application with the products that we have.
Can you explain what a mosquito dunk is?
Mosquito dunk is actually, let's see.
A slide.
Yeah. So the ones that look like the donuts.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So these go in the water and they get
Yes.
the larva.
Yeah, basically those little donuts they're a corn-based matrix impregnated with the bacterium. And you can toss that in, whatever bit of water that you're wanting to treat. My one thing I would recommend people be aware of with them is pets and wildlife sometimes think they're really cool snacks. So it won't harm them at all. It's just that, it's basically a corn donut. And so if it gets eaten, it obviously is not able to be controlling the mosquitoes. So we recommend that people tie them down or stake them down to try and make sure that, you don't have a raccoon go, oh, no, this is for me.
Now, you said that West Nile gets into the birds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can kill the birds.
Yes.
So that could explain why periodically I have to pick up dead birds around my house and throw in the dumpster.
Mm-hmm. That could be it. I'm trying to remember.
Is it more likely to have West Nile killing birds than
Window
wildlife?
Or cats.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the prevalence
Necessarily.
Well, if it's
No,
cats, you see
like-
where they try to eat them or something, I mean.
for avian.
It
Big
depends.
one now.
And window strikes. I'm trying to remember. I know in the past, the Department of Health had a program where you could send in birds to be tested for if it was West Nile. Would have to check to see if they're still doing that. But yeah, it's like, it could be West Nile, it could be something else. Of course, right now, there's bird flu circulating, so that's killing a lot of birds. So, actually, I have to check and see how active it is right now, but it's been around and amplifying since about, I wanna say 2021, thereabouts is, I think, what I remember in Maryland. So, there's a lot of other diseases that could be killing birds right now. So without getting them specifically tested, it's hard to say.
In urban and suburban areas, window strikes is one of the top killers of birds, and often they'll hit, and then they'll seem like they're fine, but then it catches up with them.
Yeah, because they're very, very delicate. So if they hit a window, even if they seem fine, generally something's like they have internal bleeding or something's fractured. Like bird flu is killing a lot of birds right now. So has been for the last several years.
So is it possible to call the number to inquire about, hey, for your issue, should I take a bird or birds that I find in my yard, put them in a plastic bag, put them in my freezer, and freeze them and then bring them to a lab? Is that a scenario that is something that could happen?
Potentially. I would look at if the Maryland Department of Health, because they're the ones that do the testing, see if Maryland Department of Health will still accept birds for testing. I know they did in the past. I do not recall if they currently still do. If they don't, however, they could probably point you or another member of the community towards somewhere that could do that. So, yep.
You have another question in the chat.
Yes.
The process and timeline at the bottom.
Yes, so can you explain the process timeline for MDA to conduct a property inspection? That partly depends on the number of personnel we have and how heavy the workload is. Ideally, it gets turned around in a couple days. If the workload is really, really heavy, it can take, a week or more from time of contacting them to let them know you want an inspection to us being able to get out there. It really depends, basically. But I would say usually, a couple weeks at most, but that would be in times where we have a very heavy workload. Or have staffing issues. That happens too sometimes.
Do we want to do one last call for questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you so much, Jean. This was a wonderful talk.
Yes, thank you very much. Very informative.